Hey everyone, Mr. Nishatka here, and I'm here with a screencast that's going to take you through all of the steps on how to complete Soundtrap Project 1. So this is really exciting because up until this point, we've been kind of doing some independent exploration of Soundtrap, going through the different loops and understanding what's available to us in the software. And today, we're going to take our first intentional step into creating our first composition for digital music class. So this one's really exciting. And it's a simple project that's going to be very exploratory, but it's going to allow us to create a composition that is musically pleasing to us and one that logically fits together using some of the thousands of loops that are available to you. So let's just take a look at the parameters and go through some of the ways that'll be most helpful in completing this project. So if you're looking for where to find the instructions, you should open your Google Classroom, go to the project, into the assignment that's called Soundtrap Project 1, and open that up. And attached to that assignment is a slide deck that contains all of the parameters for the project. So under that day 4 slide deck that's up in the Google Classroom assignment, you're going to see a slide here that's dedicated to Soundtrap Project 1. So let's quickly go through the parameters for this and let me clarify this. So Soundtrap Project 1, you're going to set up a project in Soundtrap with the following parameters. The first is that it's 8 measures long. All right, so there's a length parameter here for you. And then the rest of the instructions tell us to use different, very specific types of loops that are available to you. So you need to have one track that has a drum or a beats loop in it. All right, and that's going to be worth 1 point. One bass track, also worth a point. One guitar track, also worth a point. And one choice track. All right, reminding you that each of these tracks refers to the horizontal region in which we place these loops. Okay, so you see add new track right here, and you see this blank horizontal space. So you'll remember from your exploration that the loops go into those tracks. So when I refer to them right here, each of these tracks is dedicated to these types of loops right here. And each one needs to be 8 measures long. All right. So referring to the length, now remember, we have this ruler that's at the top of Soundtrap that measures how long, in measures and in beats, how long each of our loops is. One of the things over the years that I've noticed that my students have been confused about is, does the number that appears at these measures, does that refer to the beginning of the measure or the end of the measure? So please keep in mind that these numbers refer to the beginning of the measure. So if I were to put a loop into this track right here, and I wanted it to be 8 measures long, that loop is going to last all the way until the beginning of measure 9. So it's going to be pulled up to this longer line before the 9. Let's take a look what that looks like. All right, so let's head into our loops, keeping in mind that I can get to the loops by either clicking Browse Loops or coming up here to my top right-hand side and clicking those 2 eighth notes that appear right there. All right, so I am going to quickly come over here and I'm going to stop my webcam for a second. So you should be able to hear me right now. I just want to not take up any space on my screen with my face. So I'm going to come in here right now and I'm going to take a look at what my first project parameter, as far as my loops are concerned, tells me. So I have drums or beats. Now, you might have gone through over the last few days and found drums or beats tracks or a bass or a guitar or some other sort of a loop that you really want to use in your first composition, and I think that's fantastic. I always find that it's easiest for us to start with a drum or a beats track because I found my students have a really easier time choosing a beat that's pleasing to them and building on top of that beat, right? Everybody likes a beat that's really fire. So I can do this through a wide variety of ways. One of the really great things about this program is there are so many options to us, but we can filter it in a really, really simple way. So I've got beats right here. I can press beats and it filters into all the beats that appear in Soundtrap. Remember, if I don't want to combine beats with something else, I want to X beats out of my search field right here. I can also choose drums. And this will give me every loop here that has some sort of a drum category for it. All right, so you should start there. All right, so I'm going to go back in. I really like the beats better, so I'm going to come all the way through and I'm going to take some time listening to some of these. And it's really, really easy to get caught up in doing this. It's a rabbit hole that's easy to fall down, okay? And it's really easy. I've noticed throughout the years that it seems like a lot of my students choose loops that begin with A, all right? Because there are just so many open at the beginning of each of these menus that sometimes I don't even get out of the A's, all right? So as I explore down, that's really interesting. As I explore down, I can just hear the many, many options that are open in front of me. So as I mentioned earlier in this video that I've already chosen out some loops that I really like. So if I know that I have one that I like, I can always go up and I can always type in the name of the loop right in my search field right here. But I found one called Beat Machinify. So I'm going to go down and I'm going to find it right here. Beat Machinify. I really like this. Turn it up just a little bit. It's kind of got a modern and retro feel at the same time. Put this on right here so you can see my face. You can see me bopping along to it. And I'm going to listen to this for a second, even though I know this is the one that I'm stuck on right now. And I'm going to see if in my mind I can picture or I can imagine other sounds going along with this. All right. I'm constantly wanting to challenge my musicianship, and I'm constantly wanting to sit there and think to myself, what can I build with this? So I'm just going to let it marinate for a second. All right. And I'm going to toggle it off by hitting my spacebar. I can toggle it on and off because it's the last loop that I've selected. Now, I want to put it into track 1. Now, I can do this in 2 ways. I can double click. I can do that. I'm going to bring it back. Or I can do it the fun way, which is I can drag it in. Drag and drop. And one thing I'd like you to get used to is listening to the loop itself and then coming in and actually looking at the sound wave, is actually looking at the pattern that you have here and seeing how that gets put together. All right. So I am going to move this out of the way and come back to the beginning. And by hitting my spacebar key, I can toggle on and off as long as the loops menu is out of the way. If the loops menu is in the way, all that spacebar does is move over my search field, right? So I'm going to take the loops menu, I'm going to move it out of the way. I'm going to sit there and listen to it again. Now, this bar right here, watch what happens to my sequencer bar as it goes away, as it moves over past the 8th measure. Okay, you notice how it automatically went right back to the beginning. That's because this white colored bar right here is activated. That's called my looping bar. All right, so I can turn it on and off by clicking on it. All right, and I can see I have another vertical line that appears on this side. I can also extend it, or I can reduce it as well. All right, there might be some instances in class where we want that on, but 9 times out of 10, I'm going to ask you just to turn it off, just because it's one more thing that can get in our way. So. All right, I really like that. Now, I don't want to lose this. All right, I don't want a power outage on my machine or the internet turning off or any of the million things that can happen out of school to ruin my progress so far and to ruin my finding this loop. So I want to make sure that I come up here and I name my project and save it because I have something in a track already. So I'm going to come up to where it says Untitled Project. I'm going to click on it, and I'm just going to call this Soundtrap Project number 1. All right, I'm going to hit enter, and then I'm going to come over here and I'm going to click save. Save often. Okay, that's my big tip for you right now. Save often. All right, I can't tell you how many times I have to say that over a course of the semester. So we're happy with this. All right, let's take a look at what my next parameter is. All right, so 8 measures long. Is it 8 measures long? It's stretched all the way out to where the 9th measure begins. So that's taken care of. I can have a visual cue now of how long I need this to be. One other thing I should mention, and I'll stop my webcam so you can see what I'm doing. Sometimes when you turn on Soundtrap, you might notice that you don't have a whole lot of wiggle room here between your measures. As you can see, I have my 1st measure, my 5th measure, my 9th measure. This is zoomed out. All right, and I can adjust my zoom settings by coming down to the lower right-hand side of my screen. And see where I see this magnifying glass with a plus? And if I hover over it, I can see zoom in. And with a minus, I can see zoom out. So you can zoom in pretty darn far and see the real intricacies of all of this. So let's zoom it into a reasonable rate. I would recommend zooming in to the point where you can see all 8 measures on your screen. Okay. So I've listened to this. Now let's see. Our next parameter here is a bass track or a bass loop. So I'm imagining in my mind right now what type of a bass I might like. So let's go back into our loops function. Let's go over to the bass menu by clicking on bass, and let's listen to a couple of these. Now, in my experience so far, the basses come in one of two sort of styles. There are some basses that are really, really chill and that really just lay down a strong bass line for you. Let's see what this one does. That one's a little more rhythmic. That's pretty cool. I love it. So just for argument's sake, let's see what that sounds like with my project. All right. I'm not going to say that that doesn't sound cool, because it actually, there's a part of me. I think if I were a middle school kid, I would be much more entranced than I am now as an adult. But playing this together, I'm very distracted by that oh yeah thing that's going on there. So I don't know that I want to use it. Okay. So if I've put something in there and I've played it together with my beat that I've put up here and I want to get rid of this, don't just highlight the loop and press delete or backspace, because the track head, remember that area that's to the left of where the track of where the loop begins, that's still going to be there, and you're going to be very limited, if not just completely prohibited from putting something in here as well. So if I have it back here, and remember my oops key, my undo what I just did key is Command Z or Control Z if you're on a PC, or I can come up here. I have an undo function up here as well, and a redo function right here with these two curved arrows. I can come to the 3 dots right here, my track options. Whoops, I muted it by accident. My track options, and I can come down to delete track, and that'll take it away altogether. All right. Again, I'm going to pop off my webcam just because I want to be able to show all the different options that I have in front of me. So I've chosen a bass right now called Prism bass. That's really cool. So it's Prism 16th electro bass, which I found it right here. And the reason that I've chosen this is because I find it just to be as rhythmic as my beat. Okay, so I've listened to it. Let's see how it sounds together. So I'm going to double click this, put it in here, get rid of this altogether. Yeah. And the reason that I like the way these two work together is take a listen to when the bass sort of moves. When the bass sort of has its motion, it mirrors what the beat is doing. It's almost like a jigsaw puzzle. I'm able to fit the two together. So I'm going to come back and I'm going to click my space bar. Nice. That's a groove that I really like. That's a groove that I really like. All right. So as I'm doing that, I'm constantly thinking about what's ahead. Oops. Before I do that, I'm going to come back here and I'm going to click save again. You can't ever save a project too much, I'm learning in my experience. And speaking of saving projects, if I come up to the file menu, I can actually come to this menu option right here, and I can check in on previous versions of what I've saved as well. So that can be something really handy. Kind of reminds me of the function in Google Docs where you can restore a previous version of a Google Doc. This doesn't do it as frequently, but at least you can salvage some parts of your project if you need to go back to a previous version. So what's my next parameter? So I've got my drum and beats, I've got my bass. They're both 8 measures long because they're stretched out all the way until the 9 right here. Okay. What do I have next? I have a guitar. All right. So I am going to come back and I'm going to try to picture in my head again. I can't reinforce this enough. We're working on building our musicianship here. All right. We're working on hearing these things in our heads and trying to develop ourselves and our identity as musicians. So while it's really cool to look through and see all of the guitar or the bass or the beats options that we have, I want to create something that's really pleasing to me. So what can I sort of predict about the type of guitar loop that I might want to add to this? So I'm going to listen to this for a second. I've got a really rhythmic beat. I've got a really rhythmic bass line here. I want a guitar loop that's going to really complement that well. what I love about Soundtrap is it's so easy to put something together that sounds really cool. So guitar is my next option. So I'm going to come in here. Let me get rid of my face again. I want the webcam to be on as much because I want you to be able to see me. I want to feel like this is a connection, but it gets in the way quite often, and there's no really good place to put it. So I'm sorry I keep appearing and disappearing on you. But let's take a look. Hmm. That starts on the same pitch as my bass. Let's see what that sounds like. I can't hear it very well, so I'm going to come over here and I'm going to click the volume. I'm going to move it up. See if just changing the volume has an effect. Yeah, I'm not convinced. I don't like it that much. So there's some trial and error that's involved in this as well. So I'm going to choose these 3 buttons and I'm going to delete my track right here. So what I have chosen for my guitar is called Messenger. Come back up. Let's listen to a couple of these though. Called Messenger Sparplux. This is actually the one that I chose that I like, but I'm going to come back down. All right, and put it back in. And now, there's a real poppy vibe about this. And it could have gone in a couple different directions when I chose that guitar loop. But it to me, I hear this late 80s, early 90s sort of like pop beat going on. I'm almost seeing like old school dance vibes. Yes, I like that. I like that. And again, I've given it a new step. I'm going to just click that save button because I don't want to be that guy that doesn't save my work. I don't want to be that guy. Don't be that guy. Don't be that person. All right. All right. So I'm going to get rid of my webcam for another second. Now, what is my last parameter here? I have a choice track. So I can go in there and I can choose anything from any category. I want to give you some autonomy over this. I want to give you some independence over this. There's a lot of really cool things available to you. So as you're deciding, sometimes you can be overwhelmed with the options. And sometimes, I'm going to put my webcam back on, sometimes you can be overwhelmed with the many options that are in here. So the best way that I can train you to go about this is to listen for the thing that might be missing from your composition right now, right? So as I listen to this right now, what's missing? I've got a really cool beat, a really active bass line, a really active sort of guitar. It feels like it's missing a soul a little bit. Like it's missing like something that's going to give me the chills, something that's going to give me goosebumps a little bit. There's something that's going to really draw me to this. I need some pitch. I need a little bit of something. So I know that in my loops menu, I just have a whole lot of things that are open to me. So I mentioned earlier that it has a pop vibe to it. So let's continue along that track. Let's choose pop. So when I choose a style of music, when I go in here, it's going to give me everything that appears under pop. So beats, I don't know if I want to choose another beat because I already have beats. Bass would come in right before beats. Final piano. Let's see what that sounds like. That's kind of cool. All right. I can barely hear it, so I'm going to turn that up. So remember that volume function, it can be a little finicky. So I'm going to click on this and turn it up. I think the idea is really cool, but if you listen to the pitch, it doesn't really seem to match up with what the guitar and the bass are doing. But even though it doesn't really line up with that, I'm still going to keep in mind that that's there because that's a really cool loop. So what I did was I chose I came in and I've pre-chosen one called Dark Chi and Dark Upright Piano. So I'm going to come back up. And again, if I know the name of the loop, I can come up here and I can come up and type it in here. But sometimes I find it easier just to scroll all the way up and just so I don't miss it. So I chose Dark Piano number 8. Now, one of the really awesome things about this is I can hear a loop like that by itself. And it seems to me like this is a loop that I would use in a project that's a little bit more, I don't know, I get sentimental vibes from this, even if I choose the ones around it. It sounds delicate. It sounds, but in the context, you always have to consider context. What would this sound like in something that has a little bit more motion to it, something that's a little more raucous? So if I put this in here, let's check this out, how it works. Again, I'm having a hard time hearing it. So let's take the volume up. I'm going to move this guitar. Let's turn the volume down. I'm even going to turn the bass down just a tab. All right. I like the way that sounds. To me, that's very satisfying. And I love when I can choose a loop like this Dark Chi, this dark upright piano. And again, I'm going to solo it just by clicking on these headphones right here that will solo any specific track for me. So when I hear it, this right here, I think this is really cool. And the way this section lines up with what's happening in the beat and in the bass and in the guitar is actually really cool. So I'm going to unsolo it here. It seems to fit together really well. Again, it's this jigsaw puzzle idea. All right. That is very pleasing to me. I like the way that that sounds. And it's got 4 loops that I really enjoy. It's 4 loops that I think to my ear sound pretty good together musically, and it's something that I can be really proud of and stand behind. And I've taken my exploration into the Soundtrap loops and put something together that's just really simple and really interesting, using what we call in music a rhythm section, really having that drum, that bass, that guitar, and then giving me something that I've chosen, a choice loop that doesn't necessarily fit into those categories, is just a really cool way for us to start out in Soundtrap. So again, I'm going to save this. All right. I'm going to come back. Let's just give it one more listen just to make sure. All right. And there we go. And that is Soundtrap Project number 1. And if you have questions, always feel free to ask. But this is what it should look like. It should look very simple, just these 4 loops that are stacked on top of each other like this, 8 measures long, and there and all set for us. So when you're finished, be sure that your work is saved. Be sure that it's titled Soundtrap Project number 1. Okay, so when I go in and I look for it, I have a project waiting for me from you that says Soundtrap Project 1. So there's no question and no confusion about exactly what is waiting for me. And that's it. So thank you so much for watching this video. And please always speak up with questions. And I welcome any feedback that you might have. Thank you so much and happy composing.